Welcome to week 9 of the fantasy football season. And today you're probably wondering why I am introing this episode and not our beloved and fearless leader, Sean Moran. But Sean Moran is celebrating love this week. And he's left the reins to Aidan and I as we've all just gotten back from his wonderful wedding in Santa Ynez. So we'll be taking you through the waiver wire this week. We're going to give you some actual insights. We're going to start and go over the injuries that occurred this week. Thankfully, it's probably the best or worst, depending on how you want to look at it, injury week of the fantasy football season this so far. So nothing too bad that we have to worry about, but we'll cover all of that, including the decimation of the Jaguars wide receiver room. And yeah, then we'll get into it position by position with running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, quarterbacks. You guys know the drill. And of course, I've got Aidan Holler here with me to lead this rudderless ship without Sean. Aidan, how are you doing today? How are we recovering from the wedding?
I'm doing well. The voice is a little scratchy, Keegan. I wouldn't call 100%.
We're
The wedding took a
questionable.
bit of I'm questionable voice. It's day to day right now. But feeling good as Keegan alluded to, yeah, for the first time in RTM history, we've got just an Aidan and Keegan episode. So if you're lucky enough to be watching today, this is the first time in the very prestigious RTM history.
Yeah, bear with us. If it sounds a little different or flows a little different, it's, Sean, this is his baby. So we're here to make him proud this week, give him the freedom to enjoy his post-wedding week. I think he's doing a mini getaway. He's not doing like a full-blown getaway from the wedding, but they're going to spend some time in Ojai, California after this. So Aiden and I are here to talk about waivers. But before we get into the good stuff, we unfortunately have to talk about, of course, the injuries that occurred in week 8 of the fantasy football season today. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my player screen here, Aiden. Then we start talking about some of the injuries that happened this weekend. It's not too bad, though, all things considered, for how this fantasy
Pretty
football
light
season
this week.
this week. Yeah, pretty light. So we'll start by that, and we'll just start at the quarterback position. I think the biggest one is probably Jordan Love. Dealing with a strained groin. Malik Willis ended up finishing the game for them. I don't know about you, Aiden, but I'm not too worried about Packers players with Jordan Love being out. We've already seen Malik Willis keep them afloat for the 2 weeks Jordan Love missed. But yeah, any thoughts on your arch nemesis missing some time this week?
Yeah, it sounds like they dodged a bullet here. The initial fear yesterday was that, I think there was more for yesterday than there was today after they got the results back. So I think you do get a bit of a dip overall on that offense across the board. I'd say the one that's least affected is Jaden Reed, given his, kind of Debo-esque type of touches that he gets. So, he's going to touch the ball no matter what. But, I do think Dobbs, I do think Wicks, I do think Watson take a bit of a dip here. So keep an eye on this one. I think they've got Detroit this week.
Yep.
They have after that. They
get the bye week. So after Detroit.
And then they have a bye before they play us. That's really nice.
It's nice for pass catchers for the Packers too, and Jordan Love in general, because if he sits out 1 week, it's fine. You take the dip on Malik Willis and just move forward, because they were going to have a bye anyways. So they might. I think it's smart if they hold him out.
I agree. And then who knows? Maybe he's back in 2 weeks at Chicago. So not a ton of concern here, but you never know with growing. It's like growing soft tissues. You never know. It could be a week. It could be a month plus. So keep an eye on it.
Yeah, a quarterback that will miss time this week most likely is Drake Maye. Concussions are so hard to recover from, but we'll see if he can get back. But this is one that definitely tips the production of the pass catchers for the New England Patriots. He's going to be day to day or week to week, what they call with the concussion. I don't know. Everybody recovers from these at different speeds. Some people are back in 6 days, some miss 2 weeks, like we saw with Malik Neighbors. I think we won't really know until we see the severity of the concussion symptoms and things of that nature. But yeah, this is pretty unfortunate for a pass catching group in New England that has been void of any real production. And then he comes in and was pretty nice waiver at the quarterback position, 19-point game, 20-point game, basically averaging 20 points a game in his 2 full starts for New England, but rough for some of the pass catchers who were showing some life in New England.
Yeah, pretty brutal here. We saw Brissett, he's averaging less than 150 yards a game in full starts, whereas Drake Maye was just, right around 250. So it's, we're talking like a 50% dip in production at the quarterback position here for New England. The only guy that I think is like really safe, if anything, is Hunter Henry personally,
Yep.
due to his kind of week-to-week touchdown kind of plus. But yeah, Pop Douglas, Jalen Polk, if you come back, like it's pretty hard to start a Patriots wide receiver without Drake May at this point.
Yeah, the Keyshawn Butte resurgence out of nowhere with Drake May coming to the fold. You could just cancel that right now.
Yeah, put that one on the bench for a week, but who knows, man? He technically could clear.
He could.
Like it's not crazy. Like, it's like you said, there's, some people clear in a week, no problem. Some people are out 3-4 weeks. So yeah, keep an eye out.
Yeah, we'll be curious to see if they try and protect the rookie a little bit. I mean, they protected him for 5 weeks, so maybe it'll take a little longer with the concussion. But
yeah,
to no surprise and no shocker, again, my beloved T. Higgins has popped up on the injury report again with a soft tissue injury. And this one obviously hurts me personally, but I think it hurts all T. Higgins fantasy owners as well, too. I mean, in games where he played above 60% snaps, minus the Washington game, 12 points, 29, 14, 18. We've gone on and on about the first three target share. He's obviously been a bit focus of their game plan at the wide receiver position for the Bengals, but pops up on the injury list on Friday, gets injured with another quad soft tissue injury and misses the game against Philly this week. And I'd have to bet he probably is going to miss week 9 and who knows, maybe week 10.
Yeah, the late week soft tissue injuries are a disaster. You probably don't need to rush him back to play Vegas this week. I think the Bengals handle that one with or without T. Higgins, but week 10 at Baltimore, I've got to assume you kind of need all hands on deck there, as there's very little room for error with the Cincinnati Bengals at this point, given where they're sitting at, 2-6. So, they got to start winning.
And he was a huge part of their game plan against Baltimore earlier in the year. 14 targets, 9 receptions, 83 yards, and he had the 2 touchdowns. So I'm sure they would love to have him back. But I think it would make sense if he doesn't play week 9, which is a bummer for me. Some positive news that was negative news is Brian Thomas Jr. could be considered day-to-day. But at the beginning, it was week-to-week with the rib contusion, I think it was, or a chest contusion. Looked like he fell on top of the ball pretty awkwardly when he came down with a touchdown grab. Obviously, he had to exit the game, but MRIs confirmed nothing serious today, I saw. So I updated our injury report. But yeah, thoughts on if Brian Thomas plays? Do you still play him? I mean, their wide receiver corps is decimated right now. We'll talk about Kirk and Davis, but how are you going to approach this Brian Thomas injury?
Yeah, I missed the day-to-day update, to be honest. I saw 2 to 4 weeks earlier. So that, I think that's amazing news. I think Brian Thomas is must start at this point if he plays. Personally, for me, we're going to get to the rest of the Jaguars wide receivers here in just a second. But I think if Brian Thomas is healthy, you got to play him. He's really the only guy that has any sort of. I guess Evan Ingram actually had another pretty good week, but he's the only wide receiver there that's really has any sort of positive fantasy output right now.
I know. He's the only one who seems to be consistently scoring touchdowns. Also, still top 10, I think, in the league in receiving yards. So that would be a huge loss if he does miss time. But I think right now, the latest update is day-to-day. MRI scans came back looking pretty clean. So before we get into the other 2 pass catchers, just because I have this list all messed up, but Stefon Diggs, I have checked 3 or 4 times today. I don't have a real update on what his timeline is, but non-contact knee injuries with no updates like a day after the game are usually not a good sign.
He's
for
toast.
Players.
He's toast.
Yeah. So I think the worst fear is, some type of ACL injury, which could be season ending, or at best, maybe it's some type of bruise, but I don't know. I don't know if you've heard any extra updates. All I know right now is that it's up in the air.
Yeah. The initial fear is it's torn. Like I've seen the replay, it's like the way you kind of grimace and hold it non-contact. It's like 9 out of 10, bad. 99 out of 100 times ACL. So just tough for a wide receiver core there. That luckily Nico's on the way back, but just tough all around there to get any consistency. And for CJ Stroud, you're about to get all your guys back, and you just lost Stefon Diggs. So Tank Dell, we're going to need you to continue to step up here.
Yeah, and even if there is something like a remote chance that he's somewhat okay for the season, he definitely won't be playing. They've got a quick turnaround on Thursday night against the Jets. So no Diggs this week and potentially for the foreseeable future. And we'll talk about their wide receiver course as we go through the waiver wire ads. On top of Brian Thomas Jr., the Jags have also lost Christian Kirk for the full season with he already got surgery on a broken clavicle. So this is a guy who was a potential trade candidate. since the Jaguar season was not going as planned. You and I both know personally that this experience with Christian Kirk has been pretty miserable this year. So maybe it's just like a blessing in disguise to not have to make that line decision anymore. But yeah, it's a bummer for Kirk. I know we're both big fans, but he'll definitely be out the rest of the season here.
Yeah, that was one of my biggest 2024 face plants in terms of guys I was really kind of hitching my horse to. What an awful experience that was with Christian Kirk. Sad to see him get injured, but like, I'm glad I can get him off my roster and not have to like risk zeros in my lineup anymore. It was like dropping touchdowns. Him and Trevor were never on the same page. It was pretty much exactly why I was so high on him, were like all the things that went wrong. So that sucked.
Yeah, I had to do that last minute Saturday night game plan for your lineup. The players you thought were going to get put on the injury report weren't, and I had to make a singular drop in the league, and it was so hard. And I clicked Christian Kirk and dropped him, and it was real. It stung me. And now I'm not saying it's good that he's injured, but you're right. Like, you don't have to make that lineup decision anymore, which has been a pretty tough one. And then on top of that, Gabe Davis also injured.
The entire wide receiving core.
Yeah, basically the entire starting 3 wide receivers are injured. It's a shoulder injury. Didn't really play in week 8. I think the timeline right now is a pretty big range, but like weeks 9 through 11 he could return. But it seems like he's probably set to miss at least another week.
Yeah, this one's pretty minor, but if you're still firing up Gabe Davis in the year 2024, I don't know. God bless you. This one is not all that big for production, but we'll get to replacements, which is why like it's becoming, more important, but something to be aware of, knowing that all 3 guys are hurt. And, it's very likely that they are without all 3 of them this week.
So bad.
Which is crazy. I've never seen that before, the whole wide receiver core in 1 week.
And then lastly, at the wide receiver position is Sterling Shepard. Not a bunch of production being missed here. Has been like an interesting player to kind of like step in with all the injuries they've had. I know Godwin's been injured, and I think people are probably hoping for a bigger role with Sterling Shepard as that happens. Seems like a lot of that's gone to Kate Otten and a little bit of Jalen McMillan. But yeah, he's soft tissue, hamstring stuff, left in the second quarter. He was cleared for the second half after receiving some treatment, but a little unclear on what his timeline is right now. I think it'll just be day-to-day or questionable.
Yeah, a bit of a bummer, but it kind of just cements Jalen McMillan and Kate Otten as pretty much your 2 go-to pass catchers right now until Mike Evans is back. So
let's put it all into one funnel or 2 funnels: Kate Otten, Jalen McMillan, and wait for Mike Evans to come back. And let's just
exactly, yeah. So not a huge dip here with someone that was huge for you.
Maybe the most annoying injury that I had to go through this week is Jordan Mason, because he's been injured, and I swear that the 49ers are just addicted to keeping everything in-house. They did this with CMC. Jordan Mason obviously knew ahead of time, and he kind of blows it in the interview that says, well, he knew he was going to be the starter on Friday, but they've done it again with Jordan Mason. He comes in this game with an aggravated shoulder injury, leaves early. The last 2 games, he had a production dip due to being banged up, and it felt like he just got a touch in so they could almost call him out of the game and not have to report the injury ahead of time. I don't know what kind of gamesmanship that is, but they've got to bye this week anyways. But we'll talk a little bit about why this matters on the waiver. But like, any thoughts on Jordan Mason? It's not like he's been producing the way you wanted him to. Those first 4 weeks were awesome, but these last 4 weeks have been pretty brutal with Jordan Mason.
Yeah, it's a bummer that what feels like the last game before CMC returns. Shanahan may have just lied to us again and tricked people into playing him similar to how they did with CMC. So, a bit of a bummer. 6 touches, 1.8 points after, what looked like a potential league winner. We're going into the bye week, and if CMC is actually back, which all reports indicate he likely will be,
to be practicing through the bye week is what they said in some game simulation environments.
Yeah, so like, you have to keep Jordan Mason, but it's unlikely he's playable at this point. So it's kind of the Cinderella story with him is at least is like an RB1 is over.
Yep, and then one more running back injury. Doesn't matter too much in the fantasy world, but Kendre Miller, injured again. What are you going to do with this guy? I mean, can't stay healthy on the field. Maybe Dennis Allen was on something when he was chirping him about being on the field here. But
yeah, it's me and Keegan were talking about it right before we started. And like, he may have played his last slap in New Orleans. Dennis Allen hates him. He really has nothing to show for in terms of production through a season and a half now at the NFL level. So, it's just feels like the guy's never available. And that's an issue. That's a huge issue for a guy that's taken on day 2 in the NFL draft.
Yeah, big issue for Kendre Miller. But that kind of wraps up the injuries for the week. They weren't too bad as far as it's been this season. I think the Brian Thomas news is super encouraging. Obviously, Higgins is a bummer, but outside of Diggs, in the quarterbacks, there hasn't been too many major contributors getting injuries. So this is all pending Monday Night Football. We're recording live actually as the game's kicked off. So, but before we get into waivers, I would be remiss if I didn't do what Sean would ask of us every episode. And I need to make an ask to the Mean Team. You might be watching this for the first time. You might be stumbling upon our channel after watching somebody else's waiver wire video, or you found us through the search. But if you did, and you landed here, and you've given us a couple minutes of your time already, Aidan, what do they need to know? And why should they hang around?
Yeah, so I'll only ask, just hang around here. Pretty casual. We've got some good analytics for you. We've got some good whys as why you can listen to us. Going to timestamp all the videos for us too, so you don't even need to listen to us babble around. You can just click around. You just want to see wide receivers, boom, go on down there and get it. But just hang around, enjoy the show, like, comment, subscribe, whatever you're feeling. But happy to have you on board here.
Love that. We're becoming professionals at this pandering thing here.
You got it
now. Yeah. Sean will be happy to know from the Mean Team that he saw us do that and record that. So we're appeasing to our boss here. So it'll go on our end-of-year review as we approach that. But now, let's get into some waivers, Aidan. We're going to start here with the running back position. And we're going to go back to the well that is San Francisco to talk about what you should do in between their games here. They're obviously going on a bye week, but let's talk about Isaac Guerendo, Aidan. We know from what we just talked about with Jordan Mason, the production hasn't been great, but at least there is a hope that any running back that gets plug and play in the Shanahan system can give you some fantasy points.
Yeah, so Isaac Guerendo is interesting. As we mentioned, Jordan Mason leaves the game quite early. And Isaac Guerendo looks really good. Just looking at the stats here, 14 carries, 85 yards, 6 yards a carry. That is awesome. We like that. Found pay dirt for the first time in his NFL career and caught a couple catches. We like a running back that can do both. So this is kind of a tough one in terms of how aggressive do you want to get? It really kind of feels like he's back to his stash, unfortunately, given that they're going into the bye. And I'd assume at least one of Jordan Mason and or Christian McCaffrey are healthy coming out of the bye. But how are you approaching Guerendo here? Is this more of a stash? Do you think there's any rest of season value or what?
Yeah, so I think the thing with Guerendo is we just mentioned it, but in San Francisco's offense, it's a gold mine for running backs, and it doesn't really matter who it is. It just matters who's starting and who's playing. Jordan Mason was that in the very beginning of the year. And Guerendo got some really good usage here, and something I was looking at too. Obviously, they don't have much with Patrick Taylor, only the other running back, but the 100% of 2-minute snaps, inside of 5 attempts, looking good here. Does reach pay dirt. And Christian McCaffrey's injury is so unique and pretty scary that it's taken him 10 weeks to recover, and maybe they're just trying to get him back for the stretch run as they gear up for another playoff run. But I would not be missing out on acquiring Guerendo and making sure Mason is still set stash, regardless of if Christian McCaffrey is coming back or not. I think it's important that you have a one injury away situation for this running back room. And if you've got a lot of fab bid left, I think you could still use 10 to 15% to make sure he's on your roster, especially if you're a Mason owner. And if you're a CMC owner, you've got to have him as well too. You got to have the backup if you have CMC and you don't already have Mason. So this is your last opportunity, I think, to get somebody in the lineup that could really help you.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think that's a common theme between we've got 4 running backs for you guys today. I think it's a pretty common theme. You're kind of at the point of the year where you really want your one injury away stashes. Your league winner is probably not on the waiver wire right now. You're not slotting anyone in this week. Unless Tyrone Tracy or even Jalen Warren are out there, probably not. But all 4 of these guys, it's more so kind of gear up for the end of the fantasy season here, and potentially, like fall backwards into a starting running back. So I think great stash play, like 10% max or so.
Yep. Yeah, I know that's a good call out. I'll mention some names at the end of these like 4 that we have here for players that you should be already rostering. If they're not rostered, you'll check there first. But to go into the next kind of like stash play running back, I mean, he's graced the waiver wires every episode. It's Braelon Allen. From a Jets fan perspective, really puzzling usage on Breece Hall. The guy averages 5 yards a carry, and yet they refuse to continue running the ball and giving him the rock. But what is pretty persistent is they're giving Braelon Allen cracks at the end zone. He is a bigger back. He does kind of have that inside the 5, like running back build that you really like to see. And they're not afraid to give him an opportunity to score when they are in scoring positions at goal to go, stuff like that. Not a crazy bid I'd put out here, but just as you gear up for playoffs, if you're a Breece owner or you have a really thin running back room, just another guy I think you need to have on a roster.
Yeah. I thought what was also interesting too is I forget who your new play caller is since Hackett was relieved.
Todd Downing.
And the first 2 games while he was calling plays, he really didn't use Braelon Allen at all. Whereas like out of nowhere, he's like fully back in the fold. 12 carries, when he combined for 5 the previous 2 weeks was a bit shocking to me. Because our last rankings episode, if you guys watched it, we talked about how Breece is just like back to full on bell cow, and then they completely relapsed again,
pulled
which
the
was
rug out on us. Yeah, relapse is a good word.
And Breece looked awesome too. Like Breece was far more efficient in that game. You've got to think, some more of these touches to Breece, and potentially a different outcome we're looking at. So this guy should absolutely I'd assume some people probably dropped him after the panic over the last 2 weeks. So definitely go scan your waiver wire, see if Braelon Allen's out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just some other guys here that are must-have stashes. Blake Corum, obviously not adding any value to your fantasy team right now, but the usage for Kyron paints a pretty clear picture of what it would look like if anything were happening to Kyron. So, let's make sure Blake Corum's roster as we get into these playoff stretch runs we were talking about. I mean, 23% rostered on Sleeper. I feel like that should just be all Kyron managers at this point. And like I said,
100%.
if you got a thin RB room, like these are guys that you need to have on your roster as you head into the stretch run. Quick thoughts on Corum? I know there's not much because he's not playing a ton. So
yeah, if you own Kyron and you don't own Corum, and like he's out there, you're crazy. I mean, like risks, but I'm a little surprised that like the usage, like it's pretty consistent how much he's playing every week. It's like he kind of gets like a drive or 2, and that's it. Or like honestly, just like a couple downs. He's not even getting full drive. So I still think he's really good, but Sean McVay, Kyron works for his scheme, and he's going to run him into the ground. So keep an eye on Corum because, if he goes down, it is wheels up for Blake Corum.
Yeah, and for the next group, we may as well do them both, but it's the Dallas running back room right now. I mean, just in case, I know Rico Dowdle popped up with a illness before the game, which is so weird. I don't understand how that happens. It happened with Debo, and his ended up being really serious. So obviously, I hope Rico Dowdle is okay. But I mean, I'm not encouraging you to pick up Dalvin Cook or Ezekiel Elliott. Obviously, the fantasy production from them hasn't been great. Zeke does find the end zone there. But any thoughts on the Dallas running backs here?
Yeah, I have trouble trusting really any of them. I think Zeke is probably the one I want, but it feels more than likely that a new running back is going to be added to this roster in the next week. Whether it be a guy like Khalil Herbert, I think like Khalil Herbert would be a slam dunk in this offense personally. There's a couple of other running backs there. They're kind of buried on their depth chart here, but I truly believe the running back you want to own in Dallas is not currently wearing the star on his helmet.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not recommending that you pick them up, but if you're a Dowdle owner like me, like maybe you wanted to have a backup, but they will need running back touches at some point in this Dallas season. So
for sure,
you could do worse, but you could do a lot better. Some higher owned players that I think everybody needs to have rostered right now. Jalen Warren would be probably my first pick of this. Just thinking about, I'm not watching the game right now, so this is being recorded, like I said, and the run out has been pretty miserable. Picks up the hamstring injury before or in training camp, and he's had missed a bunch of games. Harris has been really good this year, but another one injury away guy in an offense that's a little bit better of an environment for the running game than some of the other offenses we just highlighted. But I think Warren should be on your roster. Tyrone Tracy as well, making sure he's owned. It was a very nice 2 weeks, of course. And then you had a couple other guys, Aiden, right, to call out that should be rostered if they're not already.
I think Sharp's got to be on your team. I think he's probably around the 50% ownership mark too. Yeah, 58. Just given how rich the K9 role is this year, especially in terms of pass catching as well. This is like a huge one injury away guy, but he's even getting some more touches. Like he's got some standalone value. It's not huge. And then Tyler Algier as well. Again, these are guys that are the RB2, but they're at least, they're getting touches. They're still relevant. Algier should probably around 60 as well. So likely owned, but go skim. People get impatient. People have buys, injuries where they get in a pinch and have to drop players that you could potentially fall into.
Yeah, top 4, I think I would make sure our must roster players are definitely Warren, Algier, Tyrone Tracy, Zach Charbonnet, and then take a look at Isaac Guerendo, especially if you're already invested in the SF backfield, and then Corum, Braelon Allen, good handcuff stashes, and then maybe you flirt with the Dallas backfield, but I think as long as Rico Dowdle is back, then you could probably just ignore that backfield.
I wouldn't go crazy spending on any of the 4 guys actually mentioned, like the must-own guys, absolutely. But I wouldn't spend more than 5 to 10% on some of these guys unless you're kind of handcuffing, Breece Hall, Karen Williams, etc.
Yeah, but a guy we are going to spend on, Aiden, as we move into the wide receiver positions.
Absolutely.
Is the Tennessee standout who has been rejuvenated by Jameis Winston returning back to his starting quarterback role, Cedric Tillman. Aiden, I know you guys probably already called this out on the waiver thread that you posted last week heading into the week, but back-to-back weeks, he stacked some really productive games here for this Cleveland Browns offense. Aiden, what are your thoughts on Cedric Tillman?
Yeah, this was super impressive. Like you mentioned, that the game prior was nice, and he backed it up with improved QB play in Jameis Winston. So we really shouldn't be all that surprised by this. You look at the frame; he's a round 3 guy. Like this is a day 2 guy. Played at a Power 5 conference. It's not like Cedric Tillman is some guy that we found under a rock. This is a guy that they spent like prime draft capital on him. He's got a great build. 6'3". Very quick. So, if he's still out there, this is a guy that I'd be willing to get aggressive with. Like, this looks like a legit NFL starter, in my opinion. This doesn't feel like some fool's gold. I'd be willing to put 20-30% or more if like you're thin at wide receiver. But what do you think about Mr. Tillman?
Absolutely. I mean, wide receiver 3 in PPR in the week, just looking at some of those comparables and utilization to Jeudy and Elijah Moore. I mean, 93% of routes, 23% targets per route run, 24% targets, 78% catchable targets, 17.7 ADOT. I mean, 37% of the air yard share. He was cooking when it comes to waiver wire heroes and talk about how they're being utilized. I mean, this wasn't just like a hit home on a big touchdown. I mean, he was all over the field for them. 50% of the end zone targets, they split in between Elijah Moore and Cedric Tillman. I mean, his profile is just like a big go up and get it wide receiver who can make plays at the NFL level. I don't think there's like anything kitschy or gimmicky about who he is. And, Cedric Tillman's a baller. We can also spend time, we don't spend too much time on, but mentioning Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore in this offense as well, too. I think there's some decent pickups if you miss out on Tillman. I think I might actually go Elijah Moore, just going off last week's usage. Jeudy had the higher ADOT, but I think Elijah Moore was earning a bit more targets and just seeing some of the routes. It looked like he was actually running with some intent out there and maybe having some fun playing football again with Deshaun Watson out of the picture. But I think all 3 of these guys are good options. But if you have good amount of fab left, I would, and he's not rostered yet. I mean, at Sleeper, he's only 24% rostered right now. I would unload whatever remaining fab you have for Cedric Tillman.
Yeah, I'd be pretty aggressive with Tillman. And I think I also echo what you said about the other 2 guys. I think I do prefer Elijah over Jerry Jeudy, as it feels like Jeudy is closer to Tillman in terms of like the routes they're going to be running and kind of like the overlap, whereas Elijah Moore has got more of that slot upside. He led the team in targets You know, 12 targets is super encouraging in kind of the first game with Jameis there. So Jameis is saving this passing attack. I don't think this is a one-off at all. Baltimore's got a damn good defense. This isn't like he just, beat up on the Carolina Panthers or something. This is like this is a really good team. So
I know he just let it sing, and it's so awesome. That's all we've
we
been
knew
asking
it.
for. Just give
We
some
knew
Jameis
it.
Winston plays, please. We knew it would happen,
Yes.
right? I think
Yeah.
everybody who watches the NFL or like lightly watches the NFL knew that Jameis Winston was just being held back from them wanting to stick with Deshaun Watson. But I digress. I do think those are three really good wide receiver waiver targets. And
Yep.
it's an opportunity to get, if you miss out on Cedric because he's not there, still go scan the waiver for Elijah Moore and Jerry Jeudy as well.
Absolutely. All right. Time to talk about your guy.
Time to talk about my guy. Yeah, let's talk about it. I mean, right now his sleeper rostership's a bit higher, but I think right now you have his total ownership across other leagues at about 54%. So I do think Keon Coleman here is a pretty good ad. If he hasn't been added already, I think he's a pretty good ad to have right now. I mean, this is just he's kind of
he's moving into like must play territory, let alone must roster. If he's still on your waiver wire, this is another guy I would kind of unload the clip on.
Maybe this is low hanging fruit and he's already rostered. And I don't want to hear the comments that say, not in my league. We wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't tell you just to go check the waiver wires and pick him up. But taking a look at some of the usage from, this past week, 74% of routes, 25% targets per out run, 23% of targets, 12-yard ADOT. I mean, 40% of the air yards for the team, 50% of the end zone targets. He's just a true ball winner. I mean, there's a lot of things I think Keon Coleman needs to work on in his game. But one thing I knew of him coming out of Florida State, like he's just a difference maker. He's somebody you get the ball in his hands, and I think he can really change your offense, especially when he starts going. So it's been encouraging to see kind of that week over week improvement for him.
Yep. And I think we kind of expected this with him. He's 21 years old. This is a young wide receiver here. This is not, some 5-6 year player in college. This is a guy that we knew was pretty raw, was going to take some time, and we're starting to see it. I think Amari Cooper is really beneficial for his development. I think both of them being out there, and then Khalil Shakir too. Like they pieced together a wide receiver room that just makes a ton of sense.
It's so weird, but it works.
Each guy, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. You got Shakir inside, you've got Keon Coleman as like your true X, and then you got like Amari Cooper, as the Zeke can kind of get in the slot as well. So it's like, just makes a ton of sense. Like the Bills passing attack is pretty scary. They're a real threat in the AFC.
Yeah. And I think the thing with Coleman too is like the trust from Josh to be an end zone target is really encouraging. They get to the end zone and the red zone a lot. So if you can get 50% of an end zone targets in a Josh Allen offense, like I want to invest in that.
Yeah, great.
Another, my guy on the year here that I want to talk about, who hasn't had the best weeks yet with some of his teammates being out to injury, but Jalen McMillan, that's a must roster for us. 60% on Sleeper, about 50% across all the other fantasy apps in their rostership. But thoughts on Jalen McMillan this week, Aidan, and if you're picking him up, if he's available.
Yeah, I'm still a huge fan of him. I don't think the box score tells the full story in terms of what he did. He was still second on the team in targets. Baker Mayfield, if Baker Mayfield doesn't yeah, if Baker doesn't miss him, he walks in on like a 60-yard touchdown, and his box score looks entirely different. The guy was wide open on the logo on about a call it a 15-yard kind of like post, deep slant, whatever it was. Completely missed him, but there wasn't a single guy between him and the end zone. So I still really like him. It's very clear that with Godwin out for the season and Mike Evans still sidelined, Jalen McMillan is a priority in this offense. K. Dotton is, going to be the funnel for now, but in terms of the wide receiver that you're going to be firing up, it's got to be your guy McMillan here.
Yeah, and then just look at the wide receivers he's competing with for targets, routes, in week 8. I mean, Jalen McMillan, Raheem Jarrett, Sterling Shepard, who we went over in the injuries, Ryan Miller.
I don't even know those other
routes
two guys.
for Jalen McMillan. That box score, you're right, wasn't pretty, but that all it takes is one of those balls to hit his hands from Baker, and we're talking about a massive fantasy day.
Yeah, we were one ball away from like a 25-point outing from him. So I'd say remain faithful to him.
Yeah, Keon Coleman, Cedric, Tillman, Jalen McMillan, all guys I would spend up on the fab, especially because maybe, if they're available, I would spend a bunch of money. They might not be available, but we'll get into some low owned players here really quick. And by low owned, I mean arguably 0%. So
we're going 0% out.
Gosh, I just it was taking a long time to find it on Sleeper, but yeah, Aidan, why don't you talk to us about Parker Washington here for the Jacksonville Jaguars?
Yeah, so like we mentioned, I think there's kind of two reasons you'd be picking up players. It's either past performance or situationship kind of thrusts you into a bigger role, and this one falls in the latter. Parker Washington is really the only healthy receiver in Jacksonville right now. We've got Christian Kirk out for the season. Brian Thomas Jr. looks like he's going to miss some sort of time, and Gabe Davis injured as well. I couldn't even tell you who Tim Jones is. That's the other receiver that is currently active on their roster. But this is a guy that we've seen make plays before. Returned a kick for a touchdown in London just 2 weeks ago. Scored 2 touchdowns last year. This is a guy that at least has some experience in the NFL. They're likely going to elevate a wide receiver or, sign someone off of waivers. But Parker Washington is going to get looks in this offense. I don't know how pretty it's going to be, but this is someone that I'm at least, 5-10% bid on. Just someone has to catch the ball there. Evan Ingram can't do everything.
Yeah, look, if you were already rostering Christian Kirk like you and I were, and you were just committing to being part of the Jaguars offense, or you roster Brian Thomas, you might as well just go all in, right?
Yeah, just do it.
Just commit to the bit. Obviously, these route numbers are skewed a little bit for Thomas as he gets banged up. Christian Kirk gets injured as well too. But through the game, if you look at the end of the game results, 74% of routes for Parker Washington, 50% targets per route run, 15 ADOT, 21% of the air yard share. I mean, 33% of the end zone targets obviously going to be skewed. But when you compare that to these people who won't be in the offense, Brian Thomas might play. No Christian Kirk, no Gabe Davis. You're looking at a player who almost certainly has to catch the ball. Not that we like the pickup, but there is going to be nobody else available to catch the football if Brian Thomas Jr. doesn't play.
And we already saw it. He caught 3 or 4 targets for 46 balls. The injuries happened not at the end of the game to where he was already thrust into the role towards the end of the game. So it's clear he's going to get run in this offense, whether it's by merit or just pure circumstance. Parker Washington, definitely keep an eye on him.
Yeah, and then we have another situation where we can talk about the overall team pass catchers for the Houston Texans that I think are worth taking a look at. But, John Metchie, Xavier Hutchinson, and we don't really want to talk about Bobby Trees, but I feel like we have to. But
we have
sifting through these three, Aidan, I think I have a clear pick of who I'm going to be trying to pick up, and that's probably John Metchie, but curious to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so I have 2 different takes on it. I think the guy that I do not want is Xavier Hutchinson. I just don't think he's that good. He's been thrust into a role since Nico went out in terms of your bigger body receiver on the outside, and really has nothing to show for it over the last couple of weeks. In terms of talent profile, I want to bet on John Metchie. This is a guy that would have been a surefire first rounder if it wasn't for tearing his ACL at the end of his final season at Alabama and then getting sick, missed the entire season. Robert Woods is probably the most realistic, though, if we're being completely honest in terms of your safest pick here. I think Robert Woods is a proven NFL veteran. I don't know how much gas he has left in the tank, but how I would rank these personally would be John Metchie, Robert Woods, and Xavier Hutchinson.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. It's also a good call out on the Xavier Hutchinson. He's already had a role because Nico Collins has been out, and he's kind of been put into that X position that Nico Collins is usually in, and he has nothing really to show for it. You're right, but I mean, look at this snap percentage: 71, 50, 64, 62.
He's playing. He's definitely playing.
Yeah, no, he's playing. And Robert Woods obviously only had one game above 50% snap share. Metchie hasn't even had a chance to be on the field yet. He was only on the field for 28% of snaps and turned in 4 targets for 3 receptions and 29 yards. So I think that's a good call out. In these weird situations, bet on talent. We know they're going to be without Diggs this week on a short week. We also know that Tank Dell's usage has been iffy, and Nico Collins obviously out. So somebody will have to step up. The Jets have been pretty beatable compared to past years, at least from defensive back situations and passing situations. So I definitely think I'd have Metchie here. I'm not going to big crazy on him, but that would probably be my top pick of the three. Bet on talent here. And then a late add to this that we got a text from our boss, always working, Sean Moran.
Always.
To put on everyone's radar. Always working here for Sean Moran. Never take a day off. But Jalen Coker.
Yeah,
Holy Cross, rookie. Out of nowhere. Obviously, the touchdown is garbage time and he catches it, but still turned in a pretty nice day, Aidan.
It looked really good too. I think the most exciting here thing too that me and Keegan wanted to flag here as Deontay Johnson is going to get traded. It doesn't really seem like an if at this point. It's more of a matter of when. And if that's the case, it feels like Jalen Coker is going to play more. Guy played just under 70% of the snaps. Like Keegan says, 6 targets, 4 catches. This is a lost season for Carolina. There's no other way to put it. In a lost season, you want to see what you got with some of these young players. You want to see what you have out of XL. You want to see what you have out of Jalen Coker. I'd even like to see some more out of Jonathan Mingo. It kind of feels like he's not a very good pro, but these 3 guys should be the priority in that offense moving forward once Deontay Johnson gets traded, personally.
Yeah, some interesting stuff I saw from the Coker stats and looking at the utilization stuff was not just like his air yards percentage. The ADI was really strong, but out of third and fourth down targets, 23% of those targets went to Coker. So maybe Bryce Young saw something in Coker in the offseason. I'm not sure, but there was definitely some trust in there pretty early on. But 80% of the routes, 18% targets per route run. I mean, it's not a pretty offense, but like Aidan mentioned, Deontay Johnson's going to get traded. I mean, Schefter already confirmed that he's going to get traded at the end of this week or next.
They held him out for the sole reason that they didn't want him getting hurt. And, pretty much exactly what happened to Christian Kirk is why they held him out this week is, this season's over. Go get yourself a 3rd or 4th round pick for Deontay Johnson and call it a day, like we wanted 2025.
Yep. Yeah. And then some quick hits, but I think that's it for kind of all of our wide receivers here. Players that should be rostered. Wow, man. I understand how Sean trips up on his words like this when he's in charge of posting. Gets a little tricky, but you got to make sure Josh Downs is rostered, especially now that AR might sit this week. If Joe Flacco plays, Josh Downs has got to be on a roster. If you're like me and you drop Jacoby Myers, take a look at him and maybe bring him back to the roster.
Bring him on back.
Yeah, bring him back. I think Juwan Jennings, Christian Watson, and Rashad Bateman all should be on your radar as well. Any others you can think of?
No, I think you nailed it. Just hearing Rashad Bateman made me think of that brutal drop. A bit of a stinker after he was really getting some momentum, but he needs to be rostered. Yeah, that Ravens offense is must-see TV right now.
Yeah. And on to tight ends, I believe, next here. I think we just have 2 recommendations. Aidan, I'll kind of let you take this first one away here, but who are we picking up at the tight end position?
It's pretty bare. I just want to cover guys that just make sure they're not there. We've covered them in recent weeks over the last 2 weeks, so I don't want to get too into it. Go make sure Zach Ertz is owned. That role is pretty set in stone there. And go look at Hunter Henry as well. We mentioned it during the QB section. Hunter Henry needs to be owned. He's always, 1 touchdown away. But the first guy I wanted to highlight is Taysom. Didn't have a huge role in his first week back, was out for the last couple of weeks. But Taysom is a guy that's always a threat, especially with both QBs kind of banged up and not playing very well. It feels like Taysom, once we get into the red zone, is always a threat. So go see if he's out there. With how weird tight end's been this year, who's to say Taysom doesn't absolutely, go on one of his runs here to get you into the fantasy playoff. So I don't know. Yeah, not someone I'm overly excited about, but what are your thoughts on Taysom?
Yeah, I mean, it's just their offense is so broken, and when things are broken in New Orleans, they just go back to old reliable and they pull out Taysom Hill when they need to right the ship. So always somebody good to have on your radar there. Love the call out for Ertz and Hunter Henry. I mean, these are still pretty low owned rostership guys. I think even if Brissett plays or Drake May plays, Hunter Henry is somebody you can flag on your radar. I mean, look, 9 points, 17, 13. A couple bad stretches here, but getting 9 points out of a tight end this year has felt like the most grueling experience in the world. And same with Ertz. I mean, he's averaging double-digit points over the past 3 weeks. So definitely guys you got to have on your radar. Another player to pick up, though, Mike Gesicki.
Yeah, this was a really encouraging role. This is a guy that I was actually really high on coming into the year. Started the year really encouraging too. Through the first 3 weeks, it was right around 10 points per game. Kind of fizzled out over the last couple of weeks, and then returns with a 7 catch on 8 target performance. So I think that's really encouraging. This Bengals offense is super entertaining right now. They're throwing the ball like crazy. Defense isn't very good. It's kind of exactly what you want from your fantasy offenses in terms of like your teams there. So I think you do a lot worse if you've lost a tight end or just need a fill in. Playing Vegas next week figures a game that they should go up on, score some touchdowns. So I like Gesicki. He's always a fun player.
Yeah, important to call out too, like with the T. Higgins injury, like Gesicki's definitely a play there for the Bengals, or if you're rostering, T. Higgins or something that you don't have, or maybe you don't have a good tight end. If T. Higgins misses time, like Gesicki gets a big boost in work, but that work gets pretty hamstrung once Higgins is back. So it might be like a 1 week waiver flyer. And then real quickly, we'll go through 2 quarterbacks we think are must adds, but Jameis Winston, man. Jameis is officially back on the menu. We all knew it. 334 yards in his first game as a starter. Deshaun hasn't thrown for 300 yards all year. I mean, 41 pass attempts. This was kind of like the theory for drafting Amari Cooper in the offseason, Jerry Jeudy, especially if you're doing best ball stuff. Like, there was a big theory that, like, but when Deshaun Watson would get replaced with Jameis Winston, like, this offense would be unlocked. I mean, they're still they're still leading the league, like, on most weeks in neutral pass rate, and like they run some of the most plays in the NFL. Like, this is what the offense Stefanski and like co have imagined and what they wanted to run. They just could not make it look good because of Deshaun Watson. And of course, Jameis Winston, his first game back, has 41 attempts, 27 completions, and throws for 303 tugs. I mean, we all know that probably wasn't Stefanski's decision, but nonetheless, we've made it. It's week 8, and we've made it, and we'll get to enjoy it next week as well.
It looked so good. He's willing to attack all levels of the field, sidelines, middle of the field, everything. And just looking at the schedule too, like, I would not be all that surprised if the Browns go on a bit of a run here. The Chargers are a good team, but I wouldn't say that's a game that is really all that out of the question. Looks like just looking at the line here on ESPN, Chargers are favored by less than a field goal. Come out of the bye, beat New Orleans. They're sitting there at 4-6. Like, don't be surprised if this Browns team goes on a run. Jameis has done this before. He's proven it over and over again that he's willing to do it. So I'm just excited to see him back. I'd love the content from him too. It's just like everyone wins here. Everyone wins here with Jameis under center.
Yeah, and outside of Kansas City, the playoff schedule with Jameis Winston is pretty favorable too, with Cincinnati and Miami.
Exactly.
16,
That's a great shout out.
A guy that I think you and I maybe owe some apologies to. I'm not ready to call him a perfect NFL quarterback yet, but Bo Nix has been a very serviceable fantasy quarterback for 4 weeks running now. I mean,
yeah, that's an understatement, man. He's the dual threat ability and the way he's starting to operate the Sean Payton offense is. We might owe him a bit of an apology. And again, it's the Panthers. Everyone has been dicing the Panthers. Sean Payton even said it in his presser. He said that is
not a good football team. Yeah,
that is not a good football team. But man, just look at this. He, just under 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. Actually, didn't rush that much this week. But you look at some of the previous weeks: 75 yards, 60 yards, 40. Like, this is true week to week dual threat ability out of Bo Nix, and the guy's just starting to look more confident. I think, you string together good games in the NFL as a young QB, and it's going to continue to look better like that. So,
I think you made a good call on some of the teams you've been playing too. I mean, he drops 23 points on Las Vegas, 20 on Chargers is still really encouraging. Did it with the feet, and like, that's a game where the feet that he has, like, his running ability matters to the dipped passing production. New Orleans had an off game, and then this one just heavy on the passing game, dicing up the Panthers. He will get at Baltimore, at Kansas City, and then it lightens up a little bit. Atlanta at home, to Las Vegas, Cleveland bye week. So there's some usable weeks coming out of here for Bo Nix. Like, maybe not somebody to pick up to play Baltimore, but somebody to have on your radar. Trying to think about other quarterbacks, quick hits for the quarterback position. I think Jameis is probably the top ad that you should have on your radar.
100%.
Stafford potentially with
Oh,
Cup and Puka Nakua back is definitely a good target here.
maybe Malik Willis in like deeper formats.
Yeah, really deep formats. Like if you were super flex and you need a 1 week spot start in your super flex position, like Malik Willis is not a bad ad.
Yeah.
Tua, like I don't know how many people kept him on the IR, especially in single quarterback leagues, but not a bad quarterback to have on your roster. He seemed like he was ready to play some football, running the ball, get involved in the offense. But yeah, I would say Stafford, Jameis, Bo Nix, Tua. Herbert has played some of the best football of the entire NFL at the quarterback position this year, and it finally translated to some fantasy points.
That was cool.
McConkey found the end zone twice. So all some good players to have there. But I think that's it for the week 9 waiver wires. It's not a pretty week, but you know what? This is where we win games late in the season, Aiden. This is how we prep our roster for the end of the year run. So you can't ignore it. You can't run from it. You can't hide from it. You got to attack the waivers.
Yep. We're all dealing with buys. We're all dealing with injuries. So, hopefully some of these guys help win you some matchups here. Yeah, Steelers, Niners on bye. Not too many big ones this week, which is good. But best of luck out there. That's all we got for you.
Yeah, that's it. But
that's all we got,
guys, for sitting here. If you've made it this far into the episode, you're an absolute degen, and I wouldn't want it in any other way. It means a lot to us, the Mean Team, and if you have time to comment, send Sean a congratulations. Let him know you're stoked for his wedding and his new marriage. He's no longer just married to football. He's actually just married to a wife and football now. But yeah, give Sean your best in the comments. And thanks for joining Aiden and I and bearing with us as we tried to take Sean's job for a week.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone.